The Black Maid solved the impossible problem in minutes, and the Mafia boss's reaction said it all. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It's a tale of intellect, power, and unexpected twists. Maria was used to the scorn. As the head maid in the lavish mansion of the infamous Mafia boss, Vincenzo Romano, she had learned to keep her head down, her movements quiet, and her presence barely noticed. This was the life she had chosen, the life she had been forced into. She was not part of his world. She was an invisible piece of his sprawling empire. But today, everything was about to change. Vincenzo's empire wasn't built on trust or loyalty, at least not for the people who worked for him. It was built on fear, control, and ruthless power. Maria had spent years moving between the shadows, avoiding the sharp eyes of his associates, and doing everything she could to remain out of the spotlight. But there were moments, like today, when she couldn't just be invisible. She had stumbled upon something, a clause hidden within a series of contracts, a legal trap that could destroy not only the boss's fortune but also his freedom. The words jumped off the page as if they were alive, flashing in her mind like a warning. She knew the danger. Maria wasn't just a maid. She had once been a law student before her life had been torn apart by circumstances beyond her control. When she recognized the hidden clause, her heart raced. This was the kind of thing that could ruin lives. She knew it wasn't just a simple mistake. It was an intentional trap laid by a rival family, designed to ensnare Vincenzo. And Maria, the invisible maid, was the only one who had the knowledge to see it. The clock ticked away as she stood there, frozen for a moment. If she said nothing, the Mafia boss would continue signing these contracts, and his empire would slowly collapse from within. But if she spoke, she risked everything. She had nothing to lose, except her life. She walked quietly to Vincenzo's office, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. His office was silent, the only sound the soft click of her shoes on the marble floor. She stood at the door for a moment, her hand on the handle, unsure whether to enter. But then, she pushed the door open. Inside, Vincenzo sat behind his massive desk, a glass of expensive whiskey in his hand. His cold, dark eyes locked onto hers as she entered. His gaze was sharp, as though he could read every thought in her mind. But Maria didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to. What is it? Vincenzo's voice was low, but there was a dangerous edge to it. Maria walked forward, holding the contract in her hands. She didn't look at him, didn't look at anyone else. She only focused on the paper in her hands. There's a clause in this contract, she said, her voice steady. It's a trap. It's not what it appears to be. Vincenzo didn't say a word. He just stared at her, his expression unreadable. She could feel the tension building in the room, thick like the air before a storm. Then, slowly, he reached out and took the contract from her hands. As he skimmed over the words, his eyes narrowed. She watched him closely, waiting for his reaction. It wasn't fear that she saw in his eyes, though. It was admiration. How did you know about this? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. I was once a law student, Maria replied, her voice soft but firm. I recognized the signs of a legal trap. The room was silent for a moment. Then, Vincenzo stood up, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. He walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Maria didn't know what was going to happen next. She had expected anger, perhaps a harsh word or two. But instead, Vincenzo turned back to her, his face unreadable. You've done something I never expected, he said quietly. You've saved me. Maria's heart skipped a beat. This was not the reaction she had anticipated. I didn't do it for you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Vincenzo looked at her for a long moment. Then, in an unexpected move, he nodded slowly. You're right, he said. It was the right thing to do. You've earned my respect. As he said the words, Maria felt a strange sense of relief. She hadn't expected respect. She hadn't expected anything. But in that moment, Vincenzo Romano, the feared Mafia boss, was acknowledging her intellect and her courage. It was a moment that would change both their lives forever. Stay tuned for the next part of this story to see where this unexpected turn of events will take them. I had expected a sharp reprimand, perhaps anger, or worse, the cold indifference that I had seen from him time and time again. But nothing could have prepared me for the change in Vincenzo Romano's eyes. It was admiration, something that felt like respect, something that, in this world of power and brutality, was rare. As I stood there, waiting for his next move, the tension in the room hung thick. Vincenzo didn't speak for a long moment. His gaze drifted out of the window, as though he was contemplating something deeper than just the contract in his hand. I waited in silence, unsure of what was coming next. I had expected to disappear back into the shadows once again, but instead, he finally turned and walked toward me. "You've saved me," he said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "You've saved my empire." The words hung in the air, almost unreal. I wasn't sure what to say. This was Vincenzo Romano, the man who controlled everything in his path with just a flick of his finger. And yet, here he was, acknowledging me in a way that no one had ever done before. "I didn't do it for you," I said, almost instinctively. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." He looked at me, the darkness of his eyes almost softer now, as though for the first time he saw me as something more than just an employee. He nodded slowly, as if acknowledging the truth of my words. There was a long pause, and then he spoke again. "You're right. It was the right thing to do. And for that, you've earned my respect." The weight of his words settled in my chest. I wasn't sure what to do with that respect. I wasn't sure I wanted it. But there was something about it, something in his tone, in the way he spoke, that made me realize how much this moment would change everything. Vincenzo was never one to show weakness, and yet here he was, looking at me as if I were something more than just the maid, as if I were someone who had just become a pivotal part of his empire. The silence stretched between us. My heart raced, and for a moment, I wondered if this was all a trick. A test, maybe, to see if I would crack under the pressure. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, holding his gaze, feeling the weight of the moment. "I need you to stay," Vincenzo finally said, breaking the silence. "You've proven yourself to be invaluable. I can't let you go back to being invisible. Not now." His words were like a quiet storm, unexpected and powerful. I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't sure what this meant for me. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. "You're staying here. With me?" he said, his gaze unyielding. "You'll work directly with me from now on." The implications of his words hit me all at once. I would no longer be just a maid in the background, cleaning up after the powerful men who walked through these halls. I would be part of something bigger, something dangerous, something that would forever change the course of my life. Vincenzo's words echoed in my mind as I stood there, stunned. "No one else can know about what happened here today," he added, his voice cold and serious once again. "You're part of my inner circle now, Maria, and you'll be treated as such. I don't want any mistakes." "Understood." I nodded, my mind racing. This wasn't just a job anymore. This wasn't just about cleaning up after people. This was about something much bigger. And I had just been thrust into the heart of it all. Vincenzo turned away, his gaze once again fixed on the city below. "I'll have your quarters moved to the second floor," he said, his tone dismissive now, as if the decision had already been made. "You'll live here. Full access to everything. Your new role starts now." I didn't know what to think. I had always known my place in this world. Quiet, invisible, doing my job and keeping my head down. But now, I was no longer that person. I had stepped into the shadows of power itself. I wasn't sure if I was ready for this, but I had no choice. My life had already changed forever. As Vincenzo walked away, I was left standing in the center of the room, alone with my thoughts. I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. What role would I play in this dangerous game? And would I survive it? The room was silent, the only sound the soft rustle of papers in the breeze. And in that silence, I knew something deep in my soul. I was no longer just Maria, the maid. I was now a part of something far more dangerous, something that would test me in ways I couldn't even begin to understand. But I would face it head on. Because, for the first time in my life, I had Vincenzo Romano's respect. I had spent the next few days trying to process what had just happened. The moment Vincenzo had given me that look, the look that shifted everything, was now a part of my reality, like a door that had been opened but not yet fully walked through. Every time I tried to tell myself that this was just another twist of fate, that it didn't mean anything more than a shift in my role, the weight of it pressed on my chest. I had never been more visible in this house, and I couldn't escape it. The second floor was a far cry from the cramped room I had occupied before. The quarters were spacious, with a large bed draped in satin, thick carpets beneath my feet, and walls lined with expensive artwork. It was nothing like what I had imagined my life would ever be, and yet here I was, in a place where I should feel a sense of achievement, but instead felt a nagging emptiness. The luxury was suffocating. The first night I stayed there, I could barely sleep. The quiet felt unnatural. The sound of the city outside, the hum of the air conditioning, the rustle of sheets. All these little noises made me acutely aware of my new position. I was no longer a silent observer. Vincenzo had made it clear that he expected something from me now. But what? My thoughts kept returning to that moment when he said, "You've saved my empire." I had never felt so exposed. Yet, there was something else. Something far more dangerous. It was the way he looked at me, the way his gaze lingered longer than it should have when we were alone. Something I hadn't noticed before, but it was there, growing stronger by the day. I had always kept my distance, always made sure to avoid any personal connection with him. But now, the lines had blurred. Vincenzo's words echoed in my mind as I stared out the window of my new room. The city below seemed like another world, a place that had no bearing on my own. As much as I tried to convince myself that I didn't belong here, I knew deep down that I did. My connection to him was no longer just about the contract or my role as his maid. It was something much deeper, something I couldn't yet fully understand. The following day, I was summoned to the main hall. Vincenzo had asked for me. The moment I entered, the tension in the room was palpable. His usual demeanor, that air of dominance, was still there. But there was something else, something that made the room feel different. He was standing by the grand fireplace, holding a glass of whiskey, his eyes watching me as I entered. "Maria," he said, his voice cold, but with an edge of something else that made my heart race. "I need you to look over something for me." He handed me a folder, one that looked just as important as the contracts I had gone through before. But this was different. I could feel the weight of it before I even opened it. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "A matter of trust," Vincenzo replied, his tone lowering. "You've proven that you can see things others can't. I need you to help me with something critical." My mind raced. What was he asking? This wasn't just about contracts anymore. It wasn't about the legal traps or the rival families. It was something far more dangerous. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Vincenzo's gaze darkened as he motioned to the chair beside him. "Sit down, Maria," he commanded. "I need you to make sure I'm not being played. There's someone I trust, but I think I've misjudged them. I need your mind to look at this with fresh eyes." I sat down across from him, feeling the weight of the folder in my hands. What was he asking me to uncover? This wasn't just about legalities anymore. It felt personal. I flipped through the folder, reading the papers inside. The information was shocking. A betrayal. A hidden alliance between Vincenzo and someone I had never suspected. My heart sank as I read the names, the dates, the details. It was a setup. Someone close to him had been working against him. My thoughts raced. How had he not seen this? How had I, someone who was supposed to be invisible, uncovered it before he had? The realization hit me hard. "What do you want me to do with this?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Vincenzo's gaze didn't leave mine as he replied. "I want you to tell me everything. I want you to help me root out the people who have been lying to me. I need you to stay sharp, Maria. This is no longer just about business. This is about survival." I nodded slowly, the gravity of his words sinking in. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about protecting not just him, but everything he had built. The power, the empire, the people who relied on him. And now, I was in the center of it all. The lines between right and wrong were becoming increasingly blurred. My mind raced as I realized the full extent of what Vincenzo was asking. This wasn't just about uncovering a legal loophole. This was about digging into the heart of a criminal empire and finding the betrayal that could destroy it. I was no longer just a maid. I was now a key player in this dangerous game. As I sat there, holding the folder in my hands, I couldn't help but wonder, was I ready for this? Was I ready to walk further into the darkness with him? Or was I simply too far gone to turn back now? I sat in the dimly lit room, the weight of Vincenzo's words still heavy on my chest. The folder in my hands felt like a ticking time bomb, each piece of paper inside it a clue, a betrayal, a secret that could shatter everything. He trusted me now. Or at least, I thought he did. But trust in this world was a fragile thing, and it could easily turn into something dangerous. I had already crossed a line by accepting this new role. There was no turning back. The realization hit me harder than the night I first discovered that I was no longer invisible to Vincenzo. This wasn't just about uncovering secrets or solving legal problems anymore. This was about the life I had chosen, or rather, the life that had chosen me. Vincenzo had opened the door to his world, and now I had to walk through it. Even though I wasn't sure I was ready for what lay on the other side. I knew I wasn't just solving a problem. I was uncovering something that had the potential to destroy everything Vincenzo had built. And as much as he trusted me, I had no illusions about the danger I was now in. The Mafia wasn't a place for mistakes, especially not mistakes made by people like me. People who came from nothing and were trying to make something out of nothing. Vincenzo had made me a part of his empire, but that didn't mean I was safe. In fact, it meant the opposite. I had seen what happened to people who crossed him, and now, I was a part of the very thing I used to fear. The moment I realized the depth of the conspiracy, I also realized how far I had come from the girl who once cleaned floors for a living. I had been invisible then, a ghost in a mansion full of power and wealth. Now, I was at the center of it all, and I had to keep my wits about me. I had to stay sharp. The betrayal I had uncovered was no small matter. It wasn't just about money or power. It was about loyalty, something that Vincenzo valued more than anything. The people who had been working against him weren't just business rivals. They were people he trusted. They were people he had brought into his inner circle. People who had made promises they hadn't kept. I knew I had to act quickly. Vincenzo would expect results, and I couldn't afford to fail him. I couldn't afford to fail myself. I walked down the hall toward his office, the cold marble floors echoing beneath my feet. My thoughts raced as I tried to figure out how I was going to present my findings to him. This wasn't just about revealing the truth. It was about doing it in a way that wouldn't cause chaos. I couldn't let Vincenzo see the depth of the betrayal just yet. He needed to be in control. He needed to believe that everything was still in his hands. When I reached his office, I hesitated before knocking. The door was always open to him, but it was different now. I had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure how he would see me anymore. The woman who had just solved an impossible problem, or the person who had uncovered a conspiracy that could tear everything apart. I knocked softly. "Come in." Vincenzo's voice was as calm and composed as always, but I could hear the tension beneath it. I entered, holding the folder tightly in my hands. He looked up from the papers in front of him, his dark eyes narrowing slightly as he noticed my serious expression. "What have you found?" His tone was calm, but there was an underlying urgency to it. He knew something was coming. "I found something, Vincenzo," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through my veins. "Something you need to see." I placed the folder on the desk between us, and for a moment, Vincenzo just stared at it. He didn't touch it. He didn't ask questions. He just looked at me as if he were waiting for me to say more. I took a deep breath and spoke. "There's a hidden alliance between one of your closest allies and the Volkov family. It's all in the contracts, but it's more than just business." I paused, watching him closely. His expression didn't change, but I could feel the tension in the room. "Who?" he asked quietly. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but the power in it was unmistakable. "Carmine," I said, the name slipping out of my mouth like a secret I wasn't sure I should be telling. Carmine was one of Vincenzo's oldest and most trusted associates. He had been with him through thick and thin, but what I had uncovered suggested that Carmine had been planning to betray him all along. Vincenzo's eyes flickered with something. Anger, disbelief, or maybe just a hint of shock. I couldn't tell. He didn't speak for a long time, just staring at the folder in front of him. Then, slowly, he reached for it. His fingers hovered over the paper for a moment, and when he finally opened it, his face remained unreadable. "You're sure about this?" His voice was softer now, a little more careful. "I'm sure," I said. "I went over it all. The numbers, the signatures, the dates. It's all there." Vincenzo's jaw clenched as he read through the documents. His eyes moved quickly, scanning each page. I watched him, trying to gauge his reaction, but he was a master at hiding his emotions. After what felt like an eternity, he finally looked up at me. "You did well, Maria," he said, his voice quiet. But there was something in it that made my stomach tighten. "I'll deal with this." I nodded, not sure what I was expecting him to do. You've earned your place here, he continued. But remember, you're in this now. This is your fight, too. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling over me. There was no turning back now. I wasn't just helping him anymore. I was part of his world, a world where loyalty and betrayal walked hand in hand. And as much as I tried to convince myself that I was just a maid who had stumbled into something bigger than herself, I knew the truth. I was in this for the long haul. I walked out of Vincenzo's office, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. You're in this now. His voice echoed in my mind, replaying over and over again. I wasn't just his maid anymore. I wasn't just some invisible worker. I was a part of something far more dangerous, and there was no going back. I could feel the shift within me, the change that had happened when Vincenzo had trusted me with his empire's secrets. The walls of this mansion that had once seemed like a prison now felt like a fortress, and I was both a prisoner and a protector within it. My life was no longer my own. It belonged to this world, this mafia world, where loyalty meant everything and betrayal could be deadly. I wasn't sure whether I was ready for what came next. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, meetings, and long hours spent with Vincenzo, trying to piece together the information I had uncovered. It was clear now that Carmine had been working with the Volkov family for months, feeding them information, sabotaging Vincenzo's business deals, and plotting his downfall. I wasn't just dealing with legal traps and business schemes anymore. This was personal. Carmine had been a trusted ally, a man Vincenzo had considered family. But now, it was clear he had been playing both sides, betraying the very man who had given him everything. I spent late nights in my new office, going through files, connecting dots, and trying to piece together the full scope of the betrayal. Each day, Vincenzo would check in, asking for updates, his eyes sharp and focused. There was no room for error. Every decision mattered. I had earned his trust, and now, I had to prove that I was worthy of it. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to notice something else. Vincenzo's presence was always there, watching me, guiding me, but there was something more beneath it. His gaze had changed. It was no longer just about business. It wasn't just about the empire or the betrayal. There was something personal in the way he looked at me, something I couldn't ignore. I had tried to keep my distance, to remain professional, but the connection was growing stronger, and it scared me. I was starting to see him in a new light, and I knew that it was only a matter of time before things would change. One evening, as I was finishing up a report in my office, there was a knock on the door. "Come in," I called, not looking up. The door creaked open, and I felt a presence in the room. I knew it was Vincenzo before he even spoke. "Maria," he said, his voice calm, but with an edge I couldn't place. "We need to talk." I looked up from my papers, meeting his gaze. There was something in his eyes now, something that made my heart race. "About what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He stepped closer, his movements deliberate, as if he were carefully considering his next words. "About everything," he said softly, his voice just above a whisper. "About the betrayal, the empire, and you." I felt a chill run down my spine. The way he said it, so calmly, so seriously, it made the air around us feel thick with tension. He was standing too close now, and I could feel the heat of his body, the intensity of his presence. I wanted to back away, to create distance, but I couldn't move. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine, as if trying to read me, to understand something that even I didn't fully understand. "I trust you, Maria," he said, his voice low and serious. "I never thought I would, but I do." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had never heard him speak like this before. I didn't know how to respond. "I've never trusted anyone the way I trust you," he continued, his voice soft but intense. "You've proven yourself to be invaluable, and I need you by my side." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. Vincenzo's gaze softened, but there was still something intense in the way he looked at me. "I want you to stay with me, Maria," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need you to be more than just my ally. I need you to be my partner in this." I didn't know what to say. I had spent so much of my life trying to remain invisible, trying to keep my distance from men like him. But now, everything had changed. I wasn't just his employee anymore. I was something more. Something that was still undefined, still uncertain. "Vincenzo." I started, my voice trailing off as I tried to find the right words. I don't know if I'm ready for this. He stepped closer, his hand gently brushing against mine. You don't have to be ready, he said, his voice low and reassuring. You just have to trust me. In that moment, I realized that I had already crossed the point of no return. I had trusted him once, and now, I was being asked to trust him again. The question was no longer whether I was ready, it was whether I was willing to take the leap. And as Vincenzo stood before me, his presence commanding and intense, I knew there was no turning back. I had already made my choice. I had never felt more alive, yet more terrified, than I did in that moment. Vincenzo's words had shaken me to my core, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision I was facing. The pull to stay by his side, to be part of something so powerful, was undeniable. But there was a part of me, a small but persistent voice, that screamed to walk away before it was too late. But I knew I couldn't. He had given me more than just a place in his world. He had given me a purpose. I didn't just work for him anymore. I was a part of his empire. I spent the next few days trying to adjust to my new role, to my new reality. I wasn't just a maid anymore. I wasn't just a legal advisor either. I was something far more complicated. The mansion had become my home, but it felt like a gilded cage. The luxury that surrounded me, the gold fixtures, the marble floors, the polished wood, only served as a reminder of the price I had paid to be here. I had crossed a line, and there was no going back. I tried to focus on the work at hand, the contracts, the plans to deal with the betrayal I had uncovered. Carmine was still out there, and Vincenzo was determined to make him pay. But it wasn't just about Carmine anymore. It was about proving myself worthy of the trust Vincenzo had placed in me. The tension in the house grew as we moved closer to a decision. Vincenzo was not a man who would sit idly by. He would take action, and when he did, it would be swift and final. The days blurred together, each one filled with meetings, calls, and discussions about what to do next. The Mafia world was nothing like the world I had known. It was brutal, cutthroat, and unforgiving. But I had learned one thing. In this world, power wasn't just about money or influence. It was about loyalty. It was about who you trusted and who you could rely on when everything else fell apart. That was what Vincenzo had shown me, and it was what kept me by his side. But even as I worked alongside him, something began to change between us. It wasn't just the way he looked at me. It was how I looked at him. There was a growing attraction, an undeniable connection that I couldn't ignore. Every time we were in the same room, the air seemed to crackle with electricity. He was no longer just the Mafia boss I worked for. He was someone I found myself drawn to, someone I couldn't stop thinking about. I tried to push those thoughts aside. I couldn't afford to get involved with him. I had already seen the dangers of getting too close. But there was something about the way he looked at me, something that made my heart race. I couldn't help it. I was falling for him. And I knew it was only a matter of time before everything we had built would come crashing down. One night, after another long day of planning and dealing with the fallout from Carmine's betrayal, Vincenzo invited me to his private study. It wasn't unusual for us to meet there. We had been working late on the logistics of the retaliation against Carmine. But tonight was different. When I walked in, he was sitting behind his desk, his usual sharp demeanor softened by something I couldn't place. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I felt like the world around us had disappeared. "Maria," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "We need to talk." My pulse quickened. "About what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He stood up and walked around the desk, closing the distance between us. "About everything," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "About the work, about what's happening between us." My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't sure what he meant, but the way he said it sent a wave of anticipation through me. "Vincenzo," I started, but I couldn't finish the sentence. He was standing so close now. I could feel the heat of his body, the intensity of his presence. "Maria," he said again, his voice softer now, as though this moment had been building up for a long time. "You've proven yourself to be more than just someone who cleans up my messes. You've proven yourself to be someone I can trust, someone who's capable of so much more." I felt a strange mix of pride and fear. He had always been a man of control, of power. And now, he was handing me a piece of that power, a piece of himself. "I need you to understand," he said, his voice steady but intense, "that this isn't just about loyalty anymore. It's about us. We've built something together, and I need you to be with me, fully, in every way. My heart pounded in my chest. I had never heard him speak like this before. I knew what he was saying, and yet, I couldn't fully comprehend it. Vincenzo, I stopped myself, not knowing how to express the whirlwind of emotions inside me. He reached out and cupped my face in his hands, his touch gentle but firm. I need you to decide, Maria, he said, his voice low and urgent. You're in this now. There's no turning back. I need to know if you're with me, in every sense. His words hung in the air, and for a moment, everything felt suspended in time. I had no answers, no easy way out. This was more than just a decision about loyalty. It was a decision about us, about who we were becoming. And as I looked into his eyes, I knew there was no turning back. I was already in too deep. I had made my choice. The weight of Vincenzo's words still echoed in my mind, but I knew in my heart that there was no turning back. I was fully in this now, bound to him and his world in a way I hadn't anticipated. Everything had changed in an instant, and the room that once felt like a cage now felt more like a battleground. The stakes had risen, and so had the pressure. The days that followed were filled with quiet intensity. I stayed in my new office, combing through documents and preparing myself for the next phase of our plan. But my mind couldn't stop racing. Every move I made, every decision I helped guide, felt like a tightrope walk. If I fell, it would mean everything. And Vincenzo wasn't someone who took failure lightly. I tried to focus on the task at hand. We had learned that Carmine wasn't just working with the Volkov family, but had been planning his betrayal for months. The entire network he had built was in the process of unraveling, and it was up to us to dismantle it before it was too late. Vincenzo trusted me, but I knew that trust came with consequences. He expected results, not excuses. And in this world, the price of failure wasn't just losing a job, it was losing everything. Vincenzo had become more than just the Mafia boss I worked for. The connection between us had deepened, blurred by the long hours spent together, the decisions we had to make, and the dangerous dance we were playing. Each time I saw him, the tension between us grew, palpable and undeniable. The way he looked at me, the way his presence felt too close, too intense, it made it hard to breathe sometimes. But this wasn't about feelings. This was about survival. We had a job to do. The next morning, Vincenzo called me to his office again. As I entered, the usual coldness of the room didn't quite seem to match the intensity of the situation. He was sitting behind his desk, his fingers drumming lightly on the wood. His eyes were dark, focused on something in front of him. I walked in silently, not sure what to expect. Maria, he said without looking up, I need you to meet with our inside man in the Volkov organization. We need to know exactly what they're planning next. My stomach tightened. The thought of infiltrating the Volkov family sent a chill through me. I had been deep in their territory before, but this was different. We were no longer observing from the sidelines. We were now active participants, digging in the dirt with the very people we had once considered enemies. Who is this man? I asked, trying to mask the unease in my voice. His name is Marco, Vincenzo said, finally lifting his gaze to meet mine. He's been in their ranks for years, gathering information. He's one of the few we can trust. The look in his eyes was serious, colder than usual. If we don't act fast, this war will spill into the streets. We can't let that happen. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle in. Vincenzo was right. If we didn't stop this now, the chaos would consume everything. When do we meet him? I asked, already bracing myself for what was to come. Tonight, Vincenzo replied, standing up and walking over to the window. I'm sending you with one of my men. He'll be your backup. But you need to keep your head cool. Marco is our key to everything. I nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. It was no longer just about me and Vincenzo. It was about the empire he had built, the empire I had now become a part of. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for what that truly meant. As the day dragged on, I prepared myself for the meeting. I couldn't afford to let fear or doubt cloud my judgment. This was a pivotal moment, and if I failed, there was no coming back. I met the man Vincenzo had assigned to accompany me. Luca, one of his most trusted bodyguards. He was silent, stoic, and watched me with a wariness that told me he was already sizing me up. Stay sharp tonight, Luca said as we drove toward the Volkov safe house. The Volkov family doesn't play games. Neither do we. I swallowed hard, nodding. Luca's words were clear, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being pulled into a world far darker than I had imagined. The meeting was set in an old warehouse on the edge of the city, a place where secrets were traded and loyalty was bought. As we approached the location, I felt my pulse quicken. We were stepping into the heart of enemy territory. Luca stayed close by, and we made our way into the building, where Marco was waiting. He was a tall, middle-aged man with sharp features, a well-groomed beard, and eyes that betrayed years of living in the shadows. "You're Maria, I assume?" Marco asked, his voice low and measured. "I've heard about you." "And I've heard about you," I replied, trying to remain calm. "Let's get down to business. What do you have for us?" Marco nodded, pulling out a set of documents from his coat. He placed them on the table between us, and I leaned in, my eyes scanning the pages quickly. There it was, the information we needed. The Volkov family was planning a major strike against us, one that would change the balance of power in the city. If we didn't act now, everything would be lost. "This is it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Marco looked at me carefully, his eyes studying my reaction. "You have to be careful," he warned. "The Volkovs are already onto you. They'll stop at nothing to take you down." The warning sent a chill through me, but I knew I had no choice. "We'll deal with it," I said, my voice firm. "This ends tonight." As I turned to leave, Luca's hand landed on my shoulder, a silent reminder that I wasn't in this alone. But I knew, deep down, that I was about to cross a line I could never uncross. The game had changed, and there was no going back. I was walking a razor-thin line, balancing between two worlds that were pulling me in opposite directions. The warehouse was cold, the air thick with the scent of old metal and concrete dust. Luca's presence beside me was reassuring, yet the weight of our mission pressed heavily on my chest. Marco had given us the intel we needed. Now it was time to act. Vincenzo was counting on me, but more than that, I was counting on myself. I had never felt more alive, nor more terrified. We moved quickly through the darkened hallways of the warehouse, our footsteps echoing in the silence. Every creak of the floorboards seemed amplified. Every shadow lurking in the corners felt like it was hiding an enemy. As we reached the back of the warehouse, the sound of voices drifted to us. Low, hushed conversations that we weren't meant to hear. Luca motioned for me to stay quiet, and I did, feeling the adrenaline surge through me. We were getting closer. The stakes were higher than ever. The Volkov family's plan was in motion, and we had to strike first. The information Marco had provided had detailed their movements, shipments coming in, plans to take over key territories, and, worst of all, their plan to eliminate Vincenzo. It wasn't just about territory anymore. It was personal. The betrayal cut deeper than I had anticipated. The Volkov family wasn't just trying to take over the city. They were trying to destroy the foundation of Vincenzo's power. And that meant destroying everything he had worked for. "We move in 3, Luca whispered, his voice barely audible. I nodded, my mind racing. This wasn't just about stopping a business deal gone wrong. This was about saving lives, Vincenzo's life and mine. And as twisted as it sounded, I realized that I was more than just a maid. I was part of this world now. There was no going back. 1, Luca counted down softly, his hand on the door, ready to break in. I tightened my grip on the gun I was holding, my fingers cold against the metal. This was real now. There was no turning back. 2, I swallowed, trying to steady my breathing. I couldn't afford to hesitate. 3, with a swift motion, Luca kicked the door open, and we rushed in. The room was filled with the sharp scent of smoke and the low murmur of voices that abruptly cut off as we entered. There were 3 men sitting at a table, papers scattered in front of them, their eyes widening in surprise as they reached for their weapons. But we were faster. Luca and I moved as one, trained in the art of surprise, in the art of striking first. The men were down before they could make a move. The silence that followed felt heavy, oppressive, and in that silence, the gravity of what we had just done began to sink in. We had crossed a line, but the job wasn't finished. "We need to move," Lucas said, his voice calm, but there was an edge to it. We weren't done yet. We had to find the rest of the Volkov network and take them out before they could retaliate. The next few hours were a blur of action. We moved quickly through the city, tracking down the remaining members of the Volkov family's operation. Each encounter was swift, calculated, and deadly. I wasn't just helping Vincenzo anymore. I was taking control of my own fate. The world around me was shifting, and I was no longer a bystander. This was my fight now. We were finally closing in on the last piece of the puzzle, the Volkov family's leader. The man who had been pulling the strings, the man who had orchestrated the plot against Vincenzo. It was time to end it. The final confrontation took place in an abandoned warehouse at the edge of the city, a place that felt as cold and desolate as the situation we were walking into. We knew he would be there, surrounded by his loyal men, but we also knew this was the end. This would decide everything. Stay close, Luca warned, his voice steady but filled with the tension of the moment. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. The final battle. We pushed through the front door, and the sight before us was exactly what we expected. The leader of the Volkov family stood at the far end of the room, his back to us, surrounded by armed men. But there was something in the way he stood, something that told me he wasn't surprised to see us. I knew you would come, he said, his voice calm, almost too calm. Vincenzo doesn't know when to quit, does he? His words were laced with disdain, but they didn't affect me. Not now. I had learned in this world that words were just that, words. Actions, however, spoke louder. This ends tonight, I said, my voice steady. It was a challenge, a declaration. And in that moment, I realized that I wasn't just fighting for Vincenzo. I was fighting for my own survival. The leader of the Volkov family smirked, his hand casually resting on the weapon at his side. You think you can stop me? He asked, taking a step forward. I've already won. His confidence was his downfall. I could see it in his eyes. He didn't think we were a threat. But we were, and we were about to prove it. In a matter of seconds, the warehouse erupted into chaos. Guns were drawn, shots were fired, and the air was thick with tension. Luca moved with deadly precision, taking out the men around us, but my eyes never left the leader. This wasn't just a fight. This was personal. I had seen enough betrayal, enough manipulation to last a lifetime, and I wasn't about to let him get away with it. I moved quickly, using the cover of the chaos to close the distance between us. He saw me coming, and for a split second, his smirk faltered. But it was too late. I had already made my move. The fight was over. The leader of the Volkov family was on the ground, his eyes wide with disbelief. The man who had tried to tear apart everything Vincenzo had built was no longer a threat. The silence that followed felt surreal, as if time itself had stopped. And in that moment, I knew. This was the end of one chapter, and the beginning of another. I stood in the aftermath of the battle, the air heavy with smoke and tension. The once bustling warehouse now lay in eerie silence, broken only by the sound of footsteps and the distant hum of the city outside. We had taken down the Volkov family's leader, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Vincenzo's empire was safe, for now, but the cost of that safety had been high. I could feel the weight of the decision in my bones. Every move I made, every breath I took, felt like it carried the consequences of our actions. As I looked around the room, I saw the aftermath of a world I had willingly stepped into, a world where blood was spilled for power, where alliances were forged in shadows, and where trust was as fragile as glass. I had crossed the line, and there was no going back. I turned to Luca, who was already scanning the room, his face stoic as ever. It's done, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Luca nodded, his expression unreadable. For now, he replied, his words carrying an unspoken truth. We weren't done. Not yet. The leader was down, but his family, his network, still posed a threat. As I moved past Luca, I caught sight of the body lying in the center of the room, the man who had once thought himself untouchable. It was hard to reconcile the power he had held with the cold, lifeless form on the ground. I had seen men like him before, men who believed they were above it all, who controlled others with fear and violence. But now, they were gone, and the world kept spinning. The silence in the warehouse was deafening, and I found myself unable to shake the weight of what we had just done. Was it the right thing? Or had we become the very thing we had been fighting against? I didn't know. What I did know was that I was in deeper than I had ever intended to be. The fight wasn't over. It would never be over. The city around us was full of people who would do anything to take what we had built, to tear down everything Vincenzo had worked for. And as much as I tried to deny it, I knew I was a part of that now. We need to get out of here, Lucas said, his voice pulling me from my thoughts. It's not safe to linger. I nodded, my thoughts still racing. Right. I replied, though my mind was far from focused. Luca led the way out of the warehouse, and we made our way back to the car, the city lights flickering in the distance. The drive back to the mansion was a blur of silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. As we arrived, I saw Vincenzo standing at the front door, waiting for us. His expression was unreadable, but I knew better than to try and decipher it. We had won, but in this world, victory was always fleeting. It's done, Luca said as we approached. Vincenzo nodded, but I could see the tension still in his shoulders. The weight of leadership was never truly gone, not for a man like him. Good, he said simply. But there was something in his voice, something that told me he was already thinking about what came next. What now? I asked, my voice betraying the uncertainty that had settled in my chest. Vincenzo turned to me, his eyes meeting mine with a level of intensity that made my heart race. Now, he said slowly, we prepare for the next battle. His words hung in the air between us, a stark reminder that our war was far from over. The Volkov family had been just one piece of the puzzle, and there were more pieces, more enemies, waiting in the shadows. You did well tonight, Maria, Vincenzo added, his voice softer now. You've proven your loyalty and your value. I didn't know how to respond. His praise meant something, but it also felt like a weight. The loyalty he spoke of wasn't just about following orders. It was about choosing a side in a war that had no clear boundaries. And I was choosing his. I was choosing this world. Thank you, I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. I just want to make sure we don't lose everything. Vincenzo looked at me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine, as if weighing my words. Finally, he nodded. We won't, he said firmly. Not as long as we're together. There was a finality in his tone, as though he had made a promise, one that he intended to keep. But even as he spoke those words, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all teetering on the edge of something much darker, something that could destroy us all. I need you to stay sharp, Vincenzo said, his voice turning serious once again. There's more to this than you realize. The Volkov family was just the tip of the iceberg. We have more enemies than we can count. I nodded, my resolve hardening. This wasn't a life I had chosen, but it was the one I had now, and I would see it through to the end. I'm ready, I said, my voice steady. Vincenzo gave me a brief nod of approval before turning and walking back inside the mansion. As I followed him, I couldn't help but wonder just how deep this war would go. I had crossed a line, and I was in this world for good now. But the question that haunted me was whether I would survive it. I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing. The battle had only just begun. I woke up the next morning with a feeling of unease settling in my gut. The events of the previous night, taking down the leader of the Volkov family and securing Vincenzo's position, still played in my mind. But now, in the harsh light of day, I realized the true cost of what had happened. The Volkov family's empire was no longer a threat, but there were still so many unanswered questions. Who else was involved in this conspiracy? Who could we trust? And who was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for their chance to strike? The mansion, once a place of power and safety, now felt like a cage. The walls felt too close, the silence too heavy. I had stepped deeper into this world than I ever intended, and there was no way out now. As I made my way to the kitchen for coffee, I found myself lost in thought. Vincenzo's words from the night before echoed in my mind. We won't lose everything, he had said. But would we? I had seen firsthand how quickly things could spiral out of control in this world. We had just survived one battle, but how many more would there be? How much longer could we hold onto the power we had? These questions swirled in my mind as I sat down with my coffee, the steam rising in front of me. It was then that I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know it was Vincenzo. His presence in the room was always unmistakable. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching me. I could feel his gaze, steady and intense, as if he were trying to read me, understand what I was thinking. Finally, he spoke. Maria, we need to talk. His voice was calm, but I could hear the underlying urgency in it. I nodded, setting my coffee down and standing up. We had a lot to discuss. What's going on? I asked, my voice steady, though inside I was nervous. Vincenzo didn't waste time with pleasantries. He motioned for me to follow him as he walked toward his study. I've received word that there are more people involved than we originally thought, he said, his tone serious. The Volkov family was just one piece of the puzzle. We have a bigger problem on our hands. My heart sank. I had known there were more players involved, but hearing Vincenzo say it so directly made it feel even more real. What are we dealing with? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Vincenzo turned to face me, his expression hardening. There are still traitors within my ranks. People I thought I could trust, and they've been working against me from the inside. This isn't just about the Volkovs anymore. This is about securing my entire operation. The gravity of his words settled over me like a cold wave. We had already taken down one enemy, but now we were facing a much more dangerous threat. The people closest to Vincenzo, the ones who had sworn loyalty to him, were the ones betraying him. It was worse than I had imagined. Who do you suspect? I asked quietly. Vincenzo hesitated for a moment, his jaw tightening. Carmine wasn't the only one involved, he said slowly. There are others, high-ranking members of my inner circle, who have been feeding information to our enemies. They're working with the rival families, and they've been undermining everything I've built. I felt a surge of anger. It was one thing to face an external enemy, but it was another to be betrayed by your own people. The people who had been there from the beginning, the ones you trusted with your life. Who are they? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Vincenzo looked at me, his eyes dark with determination. I don't know yet, but I will. We're going to flush them out. His tone was final, but there was a fire in his eyes that made me believe he would stop at nothing to get to the truth. I need you to. Help me, he said, his voice softer now, as if acknowledging the weight of what he was asking. You've proven your loyalty. You've proven that you're capable of more than just cleaning up the messes. I need you to find out who these people are and bring them to me. I nodded, my resolve hardening. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about helping Vincenzo. This was about protecting everything we had fought for, everything we had built. I'll do whatever it takes, I said, my voice steady, despite the storm brewing inside me. Vincenzo gave me a brief nod of approval before turning away. Good. But be careful. These people will stop at nothing to protect themselves. They'll lie, they'll deceive, and they'll do whatever it takes to cover their tracks. I need you to stay sharp. I nodded again, understanding the gravity of the situation. I won't let you down, I said. Vincenzo gave me a brief, approving glance, before walking out of the room. I stayed behind, the weight of his words settling in my chest. This wasn't just about finding the traitors. This was about protecting Vincenzo's empire and my place in it. I had come too far to turn back now. The stakes had never been higher, and I couldn't afford to fail. As I stood there, staring out the window at the sprawling mansion, I knew that the real battle was just beginning. I spent the next few days immersed in the work Vincenzo had given me. There was no time for hesitation now. I had seen what happened when people like us faltered, when even the slightest mistake could lead to a downfall. The world I had entered was unforgiving, and I was becoming more entrenched in it every day. But something had changed in me. I wasn't just an observer anymore, waiting in the shadows. I was a participant, shaping the course of events in ways I hadn't imagined. I had always kept my distance, kept my role clear and defined, but now, everything was blurred. Vincenzo had made it clear that I was part of his world, part of his plans, and I could feel the weight of that responsibility pressing down on me. The traitors within his ranks had to be found, and I was the one tasked with uncovering them. It wasn't just about loyalty anymore, it was about survival. If I failed, it wouldn't just cost me my position, it could cost me everything. I had already lost so much to this world. I couldn't afford to lose more. The nights were the hardest. After hours of research and speaking to those who might have information, I would return to my quarters, exhausted and drained, only to be haunted by the thoughts of what lay ahead. I knew Vincenzo was depending on me, but I couldn't shake the fear of what would happen if I let him down. I hadn't been raised in this world. I wasn't built for it. Yet here I was, entangled in its web. The mansion, once a symbol of power, had become a place of constant vigilance. Every conversation, every look, every movement felt like a calculated maneuver. I was learning to read people, to decipher the hidden motives behind their words, but it wasn't enough. I knew there were layers to this empire that I hadn't even begun to peel back. That night, I was summoned to Vincenzo's office again. I wasn't surprised. It had become a routine, meetings, updates, strategies. The walls of his office were lined with books, some old, some new, but all of them symbolized the man who had built his empire from the ground up. I stood in the doorway, waiting for him to acknowledge me. "Come in, Maria," he said, his voice calm, but with an edge I couldn't quite place. "We need to talk." I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. Vincenzo was standing by the window, looking out at the city below, the lights twinkling in the distance. It was a scene that had become all too familiar to me. He didn't turn to face me immediately, but I could feel the tension in the air. "I've been reviewing the information," he said finally, his voice low. "I trust you, but I need to know more. We can't afford to make mistakes, not now." I nodded, my stomach tightening. "I've been gathering intel," I said. "I think I'm getting closer, but it's slow. People are nervous. They don't want to talk." Vincenzo turned to face me, his eyes sharp and calculating. "I know," he said, his gaze steady. "But we need answers. And we need them fast. If we don't root out these traitors now, it will cost us everything." The weight of his words hung heavy in the room. I had seen Vincenzo's strength before, his ability to command a room, to control everything around him. But I had also seen the vulnerability beneath the surface. It was rare, fleeting, but it was there. And in that moment, I saw it again. "I'm counting on you, Maria," he said quietly. His voice softened, just slightly, but it was enough for me to hear the unspoken plea. "I need you to find out who's behind this. I need to know who I can trust." I felt a surge of determination. I had already made a decision. I wasn't going to let this empire fall, not on my watch. "I won't let you down," I said, my voice steady. Vincenzo studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, he gave a small nod, as if satisfied with my response. "I know you won't," he said, his tone returning to its usual cool composure. "But remember, Maria, this is more than just about finding the traitors. It's about loyalty. It's about securing the future of everything we've built. We can't afford to fail." The pressure of his words hit me hard. I had known what I was getting into, but now I understood the true stakes of the game. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about winning. It was about making sure that the people who betrayed us never had the chance to tear us down. Vincenzo turned back toward the window, his posture stiff and purposeful. "We'll meet again tomorrow," he said, his tone dismissive, as though the conversation was over. But I knew better. There was more to come. I had to be ready for whatever was next. As I left his office, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were escalating. The walls of the mansion seemed to close in on me as I made my way back to my quarters. I had promised Vincenzo I wouldn't let him down, and I would keep that promise. But the road ahead was uncertain, and the enemies we faced were more dangerous than I had imagined. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I did know one thing. I was in this for good now, and I would do whatever it took to ensure that Vincenzo's empire, and my place within it, would survive. I woke up the next morning with a sense of purpose that had settled deep within me. Vincenzo's words from the night before rang in my head, a reminder that the battle wasn't over yet. It was only just beginning. I couldn't afford to let my guard down. I had learned that much in this world. The stakes were higher than ever, and I was now fully invested in Vincenzo's empire, bound to it by more than just loyalty. It felt like a strange mix of fear and resolve coursing through me. Fear, because I knew how dangerous the people around us could be, but resolve, because I had made my choice. I was in this for good. I had already seen what happened to those who made a mistake, who faltered for even a moment, and I wasn't about to let that happen to me. Today, I had a new mission. The traitors Vincenzo had spoken of, the ones working in the shadows against him, had to be found. The challenge was bigger than it had seemed before. Carmine had been just the first domino to fall. Now, we were facing an entire network of deceit and treachery, hidden within the walls of our own organization. It was the ultimate betrayal. The people who had pledged loyalty to Vincenzo were now turning their backs on him. I knew that if I didn't act quickly, the entire foundation of everything we had built could come crashing down. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I was determined to get them. I spent the day in Vincenzo's study, sifting through information, cross-checking details. The mansion was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded over the past few days. I was used to the silence by now, but today it felt oppressive. Each passing minute seemed to stretch into eternity. I needed to find something, anything, that would lead me to the people who were working against us. My mind raced as I reviewed the files, my eyes scanning the pages. But nothing seemed to add up. The traitors were good. Too good. They had covered their tracks well. But I couldn't afford to give up. Not now. I wasn't just working for Vincenzo anymore. This was personal. As I stared at the documents in front of me, I realized something. It wasn't enough to be smart or resourceful. In this world, you had to be ruthless. You had to think like them, act like them. If I was going to survive, I had to stop playing by the rules. I had to become one of them. I picked up the phone and dialed Luca. He had been with me through all of this, through every battle, every decision. He was loyal, dependable, but even I could tell that he was starting to grow wary of how deep we were getting. "Luca," I said when he answered, "I need you to help me dig deeper. I'm not finding anything in these files, but I know there's more." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Luca spoke. "Are you sure about this? We're already treading dangerous waters. If we dig too deep, we might not come back." His voice was laced with caution, but I could hear the underlying concern. He wasn't wrong, but I had no choice. "I'm sure," I said, my voice firm. "We can't let this go on any longer. We need to know who's behind this. We need to find them before they find us." "All right," Luca replied, after a long pause. "I'll start looking into it. But be careful. The deeper we go, the more dangerous it gets." I ended the call and leaned back in my chair, running my hands through my hair. The walls of the study seemed to close in on me. I was alone in this, but I had no choice. I couldn't rely on anyone else. Not anymore. I was the only one who could protect this empire, and the only one who could keep Vincenzo safe. I stood up, pacing the room, my mind racing. I had to get ahead of this. I had to find the traitors before they made their move. I wasn't going to let anyone destroy what we had built. As I walked over to the window, the city below seemed so far away, as if I were looking at it through a veil. The city was a constant reminder of everything at stake, everything I was fighting for. And as much as I wanted to step away, as much as I wanted to pretend like I could live a normal life, I knew that wasn't possible anymore. This was my life now. The mansion, Vincenzo, the empire, it was all part of me. I had made my choice, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The rest of the day passed in a blur of phone calls and meetings, all of them leading to nothing. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something, that there was a key piece of the puzzle that we weren't seeing. But what was it? As night fell, I stood on the balcony overlooking the city, lost in thought. I had come so far, but I still didn't have all the answers. And Vincenzo was depending on me. I couldn't fail him now. The wind rustled through the trees below, carrying with it the distant sound of the city's heartbeat. In that moment, I realized something. We were no longer just playing a game. This was war, and I was going to win. I had never imagined it would come to this, the moment when everything would finally come together. It had been a long, dangerous road, and now, standing in the heart of Vincenzo's empire, I knew this was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The traitors were exposed, and the battles had been fought, but this final confrontation, this final decision, was the one that would determine everything. The mansion was quiet, as it always was late at night. The city's skyline glittered in the distance, the only sound being the soft hum of the night. But the silence in the mansion felt different now, as though it were waiting for something big. I had done everything Vincenzo had asked of me. I had rooted out the traitors. I had faced down enemies who had been hiding in the shadows, and I had helped protect the empire he had spent years building. Yet now, as I stood in front of him, I couldn't help but wonder, what would happen next? Vincenzo had become more than just a boss to me. He had become a partner, a force that I couldn't ignore. And yet, there was still so much left unsaid between us. So much left to figure out. He was standing by the fireplace when I entered, looking as composed as ever, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, the room seemed to close in around us. There was no need for words. His gaze told me everything I needed to know. "Maria," he said, his voice steady but laced, with something I couldn't quite place. "You've done more than I could have asked." His words were soft, but they carried weight. "You've proven your loyalty, your worth, and your courage." I didn't know how to respond. I had spent so much time doubting myself, wondering if I was enough, wondering if I could ever truly be part of his world. But now I knew. I was. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Vincenzo took a step closer, his gaze softening just slightly. "Now we rebuild," he said, his voice firm but with a hint of something more vulnerable beneath the surface. "We make sure that no one can threaten us again. No one." He paused, his eyes scanning my face. "But we also move forward. Together. The words hit me harder than I expected. Together. It wasn't just about business anymore. It wasn't just about survival. It was about something else, something deeper. And I knew that in that moment, everything had changed. I wasn't just fighting for Vincenzo's empire. I was fighting for us. We both had scars from this world we lived in, but together, we could face whatever came next. I'm ready, I said, my voice steady now, the uncertainty that had once clouded my thoughts gone. Whatever it takes. Vincenzo nodded, the tension in his eyes fading just a little. Good, he said, because there's still work to be done. And this time, we do it on our terms. The future had never seemed so clear, and yet, so uncertain. There were still enemies out there, still dangers lurking in the shadows. But now, we would face them together. There was no turning back. We had built something strong, something that couldn't be destroyed so easily. The power, the empire, everything we had fought for was now in our hands. And with that power came responsibility. We couldn't let it slip away. I walked to his side, feeling the weight of his presence beside me. The mansion, once a symbol of fear and isolation, now felt like a fortress. Not just for Vincenzo, but for both of us. We had weathered the storm, and now it was time to rebuild, to secure our future. What now? I asked, looking out at the city below, the lights flickering in the distance. Vincenzo placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip steady and reassuring. Now we move forward, he said. Together. And in that moment, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it as one. The game had changed, but we had the strength to win. Together, we would survive, and we would thrive. Immerse yourself in the thrilling world of power, betrayal, and undeniable attraction in this gripping series of romance stories. As a maid in the dangerous world of organized crime, Maria finds herself drawn into the complexities of loyalty, trust, and unexpected love. When betrayal strikes from within Vincenzo's empire, Maria must navigate through the dangerous shadows to uncover the truth while grappling with her growing feelings for the powerful Mafia boss. With every decision carrying life or death consequences, Maria's strength and courage are tested in ways she never anticipated. Romance stories like this one show the power of trust and the impact of unexpected alliances, as Maria learns that loyalty and love can come from the most unexpected places. As the story unfolds, Maria finds herself at the center of a battle for survival, where the lines between business, love, and betrayal blur. In these romance stories, Maria and Vincenzo must fight for their future, navigating the dangerous waters of their world and the intense, sometimes forbidden, connection between them. Will they overcome the challenges ahead, or will their bond be torn apart by the forces working against them? Tune in to witness how love and power collide in these intense romance stories where nothing is as it seems.